Some fortunes are built on nostalgia, and nostalgia, unlike steel or oil, can evaporate overnight. In 2021, a single Pokémon card sold at auction for $369,000. Not a rare painting, not a championship trophy. A piece of cardboard roughly the size of a business card printed with a cartoon fire-breathing dragon. The sale made headlines around the world. At the height of the boom, analysts estimated the vintage Pokémon card market at nearly $10 billion. To many people, it looked like proof that something remarkable had happened. Pokémon cards, the same cards traded in school cafeterias in the late 1990s, had become serious financial assets. But like many moments that look like celebrations in real time, that sale may have been something else entirely, because in hindsight, the Pokémon card boom may have peaked the exact moment the world decided it was an investment. And once that happened, the hobby was never quite the same. Understand why? You have to go back to the beginning. In the early 1990s, Japanese game designer Satoshi Tajiri had an unusual childhood hobby. He collected insects. As a child, he spent hours exploring rice fields outside Tokyo, capturing beetles and trading them with friends. But as the city expanded, those fields slowly disappeared. The landscapes that had shaped his childhood were replaced by apartment buildings and highways. Tajiri began wondering how future children would experience the same sense of discovery, so he tried to recreate it digitally. In 1996, Pokémon Red and Green launched on the Nintendo Game Boy. Players captured strange creatures, traded them with friends, and battled for bragging rights. The formula was simple: collect, trade, compete. And almost immediately, it spread. Children didn't just play the game, they organized their social lives around it. Trading became playground currency. Rare Pokémon became status symbols. Within a few years, the franchise expanded beyond video games. There was an anime series, a trading card game, toys, movies, clothing, and merchandise across the world. By the early 2000s, Pokémon had quietly become something extraordinary. It was no longer just a successful franchise. It was the highest-grossing media franchise in human history. More than Star Wars, more than Marvel, more than Hello Kitty. And the trading cards were a central part of that ecosystem. But over time, something else happened. The children who had grown up trading cards became adults. For many of them, Pokémon slowly moved into the category of nostalgia, a memory, a binder in the closet, a shoebox in the attic. For years, the hobby continued quietly in the background. Collectors still traded cards. New sets still launched. But the cultural frenzy of the late 1990s had faded, or so it seemed. Then in 2020, something cracked open. The pandemic reshaped how people spent their time. Millions of people suddenly found themselves at home, disconnected from normal routines. And when that happens, people often return to things that feel familiar. Old video games, board games, childhood hobbies. Pokémon cards began appearing everywhere again. YouTube filled with pack opening videos. Creators filmed themselves opening sealed booster boxes, revealing rare cards to millions of viewers. What had once been a niche collector hobby suddenly became mainstream entertainment again. And as viewership grew, something else followed: attention. Then the celebrities arrived. Professional athletes, rappers, Twitch streamers, influencers with millions of followers. And in June 2021, one moment captured the entire phenomenon. YouTuber Logan Paul walked into a boxing match wearing a graded holographic Charizard card around his neck. The card had been authenticated and sealed by PSA, the world's largest card grading company. Estimated value: hundreds of thousands of dollars. The image spread instantly across social media. To millions of viewers, it looked like validation. Pokémon cards weren't just collectibles anymore. They were luxury objects, financial assets, investments. And from that moment forward, the market stopped behaving like a hobby and started behaving like finance. Prices did not just rise, they exploded. Cards that had once sold for a few $100s suddenly sold for thousands. Rare cards that had sat quietly in collections for decades began appearing in major auctions. Collectors dug through attics and basements looking for forgotten binders. Professional grading companies were overwhelmed. PSA alone received so many submissions that it suspended several of its grading tiers entirely. The backlog stretched into the millions of cards. Wait times passed a year, and into that frenzy stepped a new kind of participant. Not collectors, speculators, people who weren't buying cards because they loved Pokémon. They were buying because the price chart only seemed to move in one direction, up. Entire retail stores were emptied within minutes of new shipments arriving. Scalpers resold sealed boxes online for multiples of retail price. What had once been a hobby driven by nostalgia and collecting was now behaving like a financial market. And this is where the story quietly changes, because the Pokémon Company was never trying to create scarcity. In fact, they were printing more cards than ever. New sets, new expansions, new production runs designed to meet the exploding demand. But the secondary market, where collectors and investors bought and sold rare cards, operated under a different psychology. Scarcity was assumed, value was expected to rise, and once large numbers of buyers entered the market expecting profits instead of enjoyment, the entire system changed. The hobby had crossed a line. It had shifted from collecting to speculation. And once speculation dominates a market, the timeline becomes fragile, because speculation depends on a simple belief that someone else will always pay more. By late 2022, the charts began to bend. Prices didn't collapse overnight, but the vertical climb stopped. Grading backlogs cleared, supply increased, and many of the collectors who had entered during the pandemic boom began quietly listing their cards for sale. For a while, the market cooled. Cards that once sold for $3,000 appeared online for $1,500, then $1,200. Speculative buyers disappeared, but something interesting happened next. The market didn't vanish. It stabilized. Collectors who had been priced out during the frenzy returned. New players entered the hobby. And over time, demand quietly rebuilt itself, not as a speculative frenzy, but as a collector market again. Today, analysts estimate that the vintage Pokémon card market once carried somewhere between $7 and $10 billion in circulating value. But a meaningful portion of that value was speculative premium. Value based not on long-term collectors, but on the assumption that prices would continue rising. When speculation fades, markets often return to something simpler: collectors. People who buy something because they want to own it, not because they expect a return. And that may be the real lesson of the Pokémon boom. Speculative bubbles come and go, markets rise, markets correct. Investors arrive, investors leave. But Pokémon cards were never only a market. They were always something else: a game, a shared language between kids on playgrounds and collectors decades later. Even after the speculation cooled, the hobby remained, because nostalgia is powerful. Holding a card you loved as a child still means something. Watching a new generation discover those cards for the first time means something too. And long after the investors have moved on to the next asset class, somewhere in a school cafeteria or a bedroom floor covered in booster packs, two kids will still be trading cards, not because the card is worth something, but because it means something.